Hello and welcome to First Geek 411's book club. I'm Shanine, and with me I have Chris.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
And Cameron.
Hello, hello.
All right. Before we get started, um, let us know if there's a topic you want to discuss or say hi. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as OneGeek411. Come chat with us anytime at our Discord server. Shoot us an email at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Check out the website at onegeek411.com. Come watch our regular podcast show at 6:45 Mountain Time every Monday night on Twitch, and find the videos on our YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out our sweet, sweet merch at our Redbubble store. Today we are talking about, Chris, do you want to say it?
Not all who wander spiritually are lost.
A Story of Church by Traci Rhoades. Here it is.
Got mine. Same cover. Do we all have the same?
I think there's only one.
I think there's only one
publisher.
cover at the time. You know.
I think this is a smaller publisher.
And a very new book.
Yeah, brand new,
Yep.
basically.
Because I could not find a hardcover version.
No.
Which is for the best because I'm marking this up.
All right. What are your first impressions?
This book sucked.
Wow.
No, I'm just kidding.
I hope Tracy's not here yet.
it's like I was listening and I will not be there Monday. So much animosity from that Chris fella.
Classic Chris, ruining relationships with the guests before they even happen.
I've done that 0 times. As far as I know.
That we know of.
That we know of, I guess.
Okay, first impressions, take 2 for Chris.
I really like this. I enjoy. It's really good, especially for a casual read. So super. Like I could do this in like 2 hours. In fact, I probably did the first time. But then I had to go back through and find stuff. But I like how I really enjoyed the interjection of her story's relevance but also without distracting from the story she's sharing for the guest writers, I guess. I don't know what to refer to them as. It was all really good. Makes me want to maybe start church shopping again. I don't know. We'll talk about that later.
I'll say for me, I'm a big fan of anyone that uses like 2 sets of quotation marks in like a sentence. And so like I was kind of in from the title there. And I really enjoyed it. I have like publishing criticisms, like not actually of the book itself, but like of how like the formatting of the pages was. But overall, story wise, like exactly what Chris said, I really enjoyed the interjections and getting to hear kind of almost like having Traci like bring in this topic. Then you would have 1 or 2 contributors that kind of talked about how that style thing had happened in their life. And then you kind of have Traci rounded out. And so I enjoyed that way. I like that type of storytelling. And I think that, I think it was really cool.
Definitely agree on the formatting. Because there's definitely pieces where you're like, what, like the longer guest pieces, you're like, okay, wait, is this a guest or is this Traci?
Or the number of times that the guest pieces end at a page break.
Yeah.
And so then you can't see that the formatting gets bigger to the larger text. That got me several times where I was like, wait, who's talking?
There was one time it got me and I had to like hold the pages up in the light and see like
the next page behind it.
I should have done that.
No.
I didn't do that. That's smart though. I wish I would have done that.
I was just like looking for writing cues. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is back to Traci. Okay.
Yeah. I was really ready for y'all to make fun of me for that. And I'm really glad that we all had that issue.
No, it was like there's so many times I'm like, Wait, it reads so differently than what I was just reading. Are we back to Tracy? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, I thought we were
So,
just talking about the Pentecostals. I'm so confused. Now, SBC again? What?
yeah. So for me, I first, I don't know, met Tracy, I guess, on Twitter. Um,
That's how you meet all your friends.
you're not wrong.
I mean,
There's nothing
hopefully
wrong
we
with
are
that.
your friends, and that's how you met us.
Yeah.
So, like,
So true.
got him.
um, but yeah, I don't even remember how I stumbled upon her on Twitter anymore, but I did, and she has introduced me to a very diverse church group, I guess we can call it, just a whole bunch of denominations and everything. And she always starts just lovely conversations and is genuinely interested to hear people's thoughts and experiences. Um, so I knew a little bit what I was getting into when I started reading the book, and it was basically exactly what I expected from Tracy. Just a lot of love for church and a lot of love for people who go to church. And I just realized I forgot to do my synopsis. So we'll do that before we move on to the next questions.
I have another first impression, and that this was a lot less somebody leaving church and coming back than I expected based on the title. Like, I will say, like, that's one of the things that, like, title completely makes sense. But like going into it, I was definitely waiting for that, like, and here was the bad experience that I left church for a while and came back. And I'm definitely like happy that that didn't happen to her, but like that was definitely something that like that I was waiting for.
Yeah, I think someone on Twitter made a comment kind of close to that today as well. And I mean, I guess that's not a totally wild assumption from the title, but yeah, not at all. So, what not all who wander spiritually are lost.
Thank you.
So proud. So proud.
Just for you. Um, so Tracy has always loved church. She grew up in the SPC, and throughout her life, with changing situations and locations, she was led to explore many traditions. She shares her story and the stories of friends from many diverse denominations of finding Jesus in many different church traditions, as well as her vision for a more ecumenical church where we can worship God in many different ways together. So, have you read other books about church?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. This is the first one I've read in a while. Like that was kind of one of the things. Like I know Emma had kind of mentioned this before, of like reading nonfiction a lot slower than fiction, and this is kind of one of the first times that. I mean, I guess it's like the first nonfiction book that we've read, in like the sense of like we did Advent, a Thread in the Night, but that was more of like Devo thoughts rather than like a novel or a book. But
Yeah, I mean, like obviously, like I mean, so like Blue Like Jazz, obviously a story of a little more like along what Cameron's probably expecting out of this, the departure from church and kind of like the return into faith from there. But yeah, I mean, definitely have, whether it was for school or on my own. There's always books being referred. um, but yeah, I this one is probably one I've enjoyed the most in a long time. It's very uplifting, and it's also just broader, I think, because it's written from so many experiences.
How does it compare to the other books that you've read, Cameron?
um, this one has, it's almost like an interesting mix of like how to do church and then how to live church, if that makes sense. where it feels like a lot of, especially like from the stuff that I was reading as a minister, a lot of the stuff kind of falls into those like, and here's how we do home church and it's different, or here's the like, here's how you build ministry and like that kind of thing. And this kind of had a good mix of both, where you get that um like that mindset of like exploring and trying to find what is right. But at the same time, you are like, Traci's never saying that like somebody's wrong. And so there's not the, like, there were no call to actions in the book. I guess maybe that's what I'm trying to say. Like there's never a, you need to do this. There's just a lot of these are things that people have found impactful in their worship, in their spirituality. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also something I really appreciated about it is so many books about church are like writings and then guide notes. Like they're a how-to often, with the exception of a few, obviously. But this is just sharing stories. This is just shared experiences, and it's wonderful because you can't critique people's experiences.
Yeah. This is, I think, actually the first book that I've read about church specifically. Like, I've read a lot of Christian nonfiction, but never about church. And I liked this being my first.
Mhm.
So, what aspects of the author's story or other stories shared in the book could you most relate to?
One of the things that I really liked was Traci's like curiosity. I think that that's something, and she kind of calls that out for some people, that they have very happily and worshipped and served at one church their whole life. Um, but that was definitely one of the things that I saw, that I really connected with, is that idea of the, like, what if what I've known my whole life isn't the only way? And so I really enjoyed that, and I liked her attitude going into that, and definitely something that I strive for there is the like being positive about where I came from. And I think that that was something that was really cool. Um,
Yeah. Um, Early on, it was harder for me to kind of really relate, just because they were a lot more of the raised in the church, grew up in the church, have no hard feelings situations. Um, and I'm just like, well, lucky you. um, but they definitely were like, she did include other voices, which was phenomenal. Specifically, like, I think I most closely related with Aaron. With his experiences of getting involved in ministry, growing, burning out, and then not feeling missed, and then kind of finding his church community on the outside of church walls. And I think, yeah, I really related to his story specifically.
Yeah, I think, like Cameron, I related a lot to Traci as well. Like growing up evangelical and just recently discovering other traditions and realizing that they're not as weird as I thought they were. And I think I also related to, she shared a little bit about having pastors leave the church and going through lots of interim pastors and church politics. And she used the term spiritual upheaval. And that's also something that is part of my church story. So I could relate to those experiences and feelings.
did you have like any of the specific portions that, or the contributors that stood out to you, Shanine?
I don't know. I can't think of anyone specifically off the top of my head, and I didn't have anything written down in my notes.
Right. I wish that, again, back to the formatting. I wish they would have reiterated at the end of the quotes who it was, because the only time we actually see their names is meet, and then it's just, and then interjections, and then continuations of them. And it would have been nice to be like, by the way, this is who is contributing here throughout. I think then maybe you might have a better idea of someone that stood out to you. Whereas, like, I had to go back and be like, okay, noted, this is who this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a quote from Leslie.
I have a quote from Connie?
So for me,
Colleen. 3 different names.
got there.
Got there.
So for me, I connected with Aaron a lot for a lot of the same reasons Chris mentioned. Like basically the situation with Aaron is kind of one of my big fears when I was in ministry, was that like just burning out, not knowing where to go from there. And then I also connected with Ed. And I think there was a lot of that. We'll get into like our personal faith journeys later on, or like our story of churches. But I think that there's a lot in what Ed talks about that I kind of connected with, especially as someone that like has a degree in Bible and like was in like full-time ministry for several years. So like there's definitely a lot in that I was like, yeah, yep. I get that. But
Yeah, it's rough. But I did also relate, like, because, you know, to Traci in general, like, exploring all the different, like, because I'm pretty sure I've attended every church in Helena at least once. And part of that, like, was, you know, I've had meetings at pretty much every church at least once. But also, like, I just wanted to experience different things. And Helena has a pretty diverse, but also not diverse church community. But so it's always interesting seeing how others experience their faith in church.
Okay. I'm going to read a quote. And then if you have any quotes, you can get them ready. All right. So Traci wrote, I am saddened when I hear of those who experienced so much difficulty in their childhood days at church. Legalism, abuse, lies, judgment, cult movements. It shouldn't be that way. I want to start out addressing this important reality. If your experience with church is drastically dissimilar from mine, I see you. I'm sorry for the ways this human institution has hurt you. Christ doesn't hurt. His conviction is instructive, not destructive, in nature. He promises if we come to him, we can share in his easy yoke and lightened burdens. It doesn't mean our lives suddenly become perfect, but he walks beside us through it all. In sharing my story and what I, along with others, have realized from our varied experiences as believers, I hope we'll better understand the good that happens when we come to him together.
we were laughing because Chris had that underlined in his. So that then he was holding it up for the camera.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that's included so early on too.
That's
Yes,
I really,
that's on page 3.
Yeah, I was really happy that was, because that was one of the things that I was wondering if that was going to be addressed. And I was definitely curious to what was going to happen. Again, because at the time I thought this was going to be a whole lot more of like the leaving church wandering story. And so I was really that kind of on page 3 sets the tone for what it's all going to be about. Also, a big shout out to Traces of Faith, who just followed us. I wonder who that could be.
What?
So welcome.
But yeah, I was also like, not gonna lie, if that wasn't addressed as early on as it was, like after the first, couple pages, if I was just to pick this up, like, I probably wouldn't have continued reading it. Just because it would have felt like, well, it's so different from my experience or whatever. And that being acknowledged made me want to read more just because, like, they obviously recognize that, hey, the church is messy. And this entire book isn't necessarily going to be just, you should go to church and stay there for 20 years because that's the experience everyone should have.
Yeah, I liked it too. Cause like the book, it's more of a love letter to church. So it's not, the whole thing isn't about church hurt and things like that. But it's definitely important to address it in order to be able to speak honestly about church.
Yeah. And I think that was a good like tone throughout the book, is that it, and one of the quotes that I had that I, of course, like immediately lost as soon as I was going to read it. There we go. Is who among us truly understands the mystery of communion after all? And so kind of like tying that in, one of the things that I loved is the overall, I don't know if mystery is the right word, but I felt that it was really cool to see the balance between like, here's how Ash Wednesday works for me as a Church of Christ kid that's never done Ash Wednesday, but then at the same time, not trying to explain everything and letting people's faith journeys be their own faith journeys in those things. I thought that was a really cool, like, line that Traci walked. Maybe that's the best way to say what I'm thinking in my head. But
It also is like such a relief because like because of those experiences, because so often sometimes, and like seeing that she's had like good transition experiences too, because sometimes we just hear about some denominations being, we are the only denomination, or in instances like that, or like it's like, oh, you got to be careful, in which they did have some of those interactions for sure. But it is just so awesome to see that not even just like acknowledging that people have those own faith walks, but also like seeking to experience those alongside them, and then continuously considering them your brothers and sisters in Christ. So awesome.
Kind of adding it to that, another quote, I was flipping through and found a thing I underlined. Christians don't have to agree completely on every theological point to do life together. As I say, with the three of us pretty confidently having very different faith journeys. And so, and yeah, and I think that's, again, like it's just echoing what Chris just said. I think it's such a cool thing of bringing people together in their various journeys.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this book does such a good job about that. For my quote, speaking of communion, it's not like a serious one, but I just love this. And it does come from Colleen. However, I sometimes find myself pondering one very important question. Why do communion bread manufacturers think Jesus tastes like packing peanuts? And I love that because it like I have been to so many churches, where it is just the prepackaged juice with a little wafer on top or whatever. And, communion is just such a cool thing and a cool aspect, like at least in terms of how it's partaken in. Like it varies so widely, and I love how they talked about it in this. But that's the important question of the book, not gonna lie, because it's like communion is such a staple of our faith, and sometimes we treat it like this little prepackaged thing that we just need to get through, and then other times we treat it like as this really intimate thing as we're breaking bread within our church and partaking. And it's just kind of the just where it's emphasized, and I just love that quote. And it's about food, so
Yeah, the Church of Christ in me feels like I could go into like a huge discussion, and this is maybe something that, for Monday, 6:45 Mountain Time on twitch.tv/1geek411 when Traci is on. Like there's so much that like I kind of want to pick Traci's brain on when it comes specifically to how she talks about like communion and baptism. Because like I think that just like how those are present and how they're presented in all these different faith traditions especially is so interesting.
And I like
And
how
like
she leaves it at like this. It's a mystery. I don't have the
Yeah.
answer to this.
Yeah.
Like this is where I'm at currently. This is where I was at this point in my life. This is, and all those things. And I just love that because that is ultimately they're dividing things among our denominations, but we're gonna be debating those through the end of
Right.
until Jesus returns, and it's like okay. And I love how she approached it and just it is what it is. It's a question.
Like flipping through, I just have so many things. Like I mentioned this in one of our normal podcasts, but like just reading like nonfiction so much differently. Like I have pages dog-eared. I have like, and probably not as much as like other people, but like it's just so interesting flipping back through and being like, oh yeah, that was a really good thing, like really good point or good quote that I liked, or things like that.
Yeah, while I may not read nonfiction slower technically, I will read it more. Like
Mm-hmm.
like as I'm like I'll read it straight through first. And it goes so fast. It's like, okay, hour and a half later, I've read the whole book. But because it's nonfiction, I have to go back and like pick at it, find things, and find the things that I'm like, okay, I want to remember this. I want to use this. I want to, and then so that I'm more likely to read it multiple times back to back, or continue. So it will take me ultimately longer, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't take me longer to read necessarily. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just putting words together and hope they make sense. Sometimes.
One of the other quotes that I really like that kind of convicted me is on page 71. I'm pretty sure it's Traci. She says, many Christians seem to think they have enough on their hands trying to study the Bible without knowing about things like church history or the finer points of doctrine and traditions, and seem worlds apart from our own daily lives. Like that was one that kind of hit me just because like it really wasn't until like I got to college like and was studying Bible that I really kind of started to understand a lot of what was going on through church history. Like I knew some of the like broad overviews of it, but like Traci mentions tulip and things like that. It wasn't really until like I got to college that I even really knew what that was. And so that was one of the things that it kind of stood out of like why don't I know more about this? Like this seems like something that I should be more informed on. But here we are.
One thing I also really like that she does is when she does approach like a new faith and she talks about their founding, and she's just like, when she refers to the founder, he was a great man or great man of God in Christ or whichever, like, and it's like just every time it's mentioned like the founder is just like, all I know about them is they were an early early man of faith in Christ, or I can't remember exactly how she phrases it, but I just love that every time. Just acknowledging that all these denominations have their roots coming from someone that loved God, and that's the important piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any other quotes?
How
I'm
long
sure.
we got? Shani, why don't you share one?
We
You haven't
just
shared
read
one.
the book? Should we just read it live right
now? Sure. So I've got one from Leslie Albizadi's story. She says, some wandering is good. Wandering affords us a different perspective and the ability to make discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's like, and one of the things that I really liked about this book, I'll say this probably about several different topics throughout, but because this is another one that I really liked it about, is that Traci did a really good job of like walking the line between like she's not presenting go to every single church, never have a home church. But she's also not presenting stay in your home church, never go anywhere else. And I think that that's such a cool part of how she presents wandering through this book. Is that it is this, you're like wandering to learn, wandering to experience. And I think that that's such a cool way of like bringing all that learning in without being like, just don't be part of your starting faith tradition.
Yeah. Like she does like in it through she talks about wanting to return to like or like when she does move like finding another Southern Baptist church but wasn't available, so then she's like, well, I'll just consider anything. Like I'm gonna experience and like find something somewhere where that meets what I'm looking for. And I love that just grew her, and she's like, and then it challenged her too. She's like when she did what it's like when she did originally consider Pentecostal church, she's like, people can't experience Jesus that way, can they? um and it's like the answer is yes, obviously they can. um and that's even like had people from all the like from a Pentecostal background then like immediately go straight into the Pentecostal experience, and is wonderful. I'm sure I have quotes all over this thing, but
Another one that I liked, again, as someone who knows literally nothing about Ash Wednesday, um, but in that section, um, Traci has that I'm thankful, so thankful she gets to hear these words too. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Like me, like you, she is part of an eternal tradition of sinners becoming saints, thanks to the precious blood of Christ. So I liked that. Just it's such a simple summary of like Christianity. Like, and I just loved how that was worded. Like that it is this cycle of people, and people are saved, not like we're all sinners trying to do our bests, and we're saved through the blood of Christ. And like we'll have denominations that will argue on the finer points of what that means, but like in the end, that's what we're all striving for, is to do our best, and then like being washed in the blood.
like one thing I do relate to is her college experience when she first goes to the Christian university. Um, just because like it's very on point for the like because that's why I chose to go to a Christian university. She talks about one of the reasons I chose to attend a Christian university was so I could encounter Jesus in a bigger way. I envisioned Friday nights doing Bible studies, summers taking mission trips, and an overdose of praise and worship every day. If you wanted these things, you could find them, but what I discovered was not everyone was there looking for a richer faith experience. Some of the students attend this universities on the blah blah. That's not the important piece. Um, it wasn't all Jesus all the time, unless you wanted it to be. I began to learn no one takes more responsibility for your faith walk than you do. Mm-hmm. And I love that because I went to Oklahoma Christian expecting just, to be immersed in an area, but then also I got distracted by all the rules that I couldn't keep up with. She also addresses. But,
yep.
Which also was one piece that I had. I just need to find it again. When she talks about, I don't know. No one told this to me. It just kind of came to be. Oh, I often wonder where these closed-minded legalistic thoughts came from, because I don't recall any of our pastors standing at the pulpit doling out lists of what you could and couldn't do, although perhaps they were, and it went right over my head. I'm pretty sure I had never had a pastor tell us how to vote in upcoming elections. I don't remember anyone telling me I couldn't dance, but when I attended a private Southern Baptist university my freshman year in college, it was right there in the bylaws. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was so confused.
Okay, I'll do one more quote.
Do it.
Okay. I'm not telling you we have to stop noticing how our traditions vary from one another. I'm suggesting that rather than eagle eye the differences and demanding you're right, we learn from one another. We realize discovering new ways to worship Jesus can grow our faith. We accept faith must have a certain sense of mystery to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that summarizes pretty much like every denomination's approach to like we are doing the best with what we have and translating and trying to understand these weird things that take place in the Bible and apply them to our faith. And we've come through like all these different positions on baptism, on how communion should be, on the different uh, approaches. Like, not the word I'm thinking of. Why can't I think of the word?
Use it in a sentence.
I'm trying. That's what I'm doing in my head. My internal monologue's going crazy, trying to like, and it just stops mid sentence because it can't. The word doesn't populate. Oh well, it'll come to me like 1 a.m, and I'll wake up. Come to me in a dream. But that ultimately the things are they are ultimately mysterious. We don't have a full understanding from what we have. We only have what we can kind of pursue and experience ourselves, and it's mysterious.
All right. Any last quotes?
I'm sure we'll have them sprinkled in.
I'll
Okay.
quote as we answer other questions. It's all great. It's all good.
All right. Was there anything in the book that surprised you?
I'm in general like the entire thing kind of did. It just wasn't entirely what I was expecting, as Cameron previously mentioned. But like after the first chapter, like I had a better idea of what to expect, so nothing really surprised me once I started reading. Um, but I'm very happy with everything. That's all I'm gonna say for now.
Um, I think I kind of like alluded to this earlier. One of the things that I was kind of surprised by was how, and of course this is because I don't know Tracy, so I wasn't aware of like how she is on social media or anything like that. But overall, she stayed much more positive throughout than I expected. I mean, maybe that's my own like cynicism or whatever coming through, but like, um, that was something that surprised me in a very good way. I was very happy that that was how it worked or how it went, but I was definitely like expecting the shoe to drop, that kind of thing. And then one of the things that I liked also was maybe this was less of a surprise, but I was kind of surprised at the amount of it that there was. And that is the like references to like what Tracy had been reading. So like even on like page 4 or something, she references Shauna Nequest and stuff like that. And there's just a lot of those throughout. And I'm like, like this is like a pretty solid list of like contemporary Christian thinkers that are referenced in this book. Um, and so I was like, man, maybe I need to do like the book tour through all the things that she mentions.
It's like we have a whole like year of book clubs just from this book. Because apparently that's the only way Cameron reads right now. So, which is understandable. What about you? Were you surprised, Janine?
I don't think there was anything that surprised me. Like I said before, I know Tracy.
I know Tracy.
I know Tracy.
I feel like we all know Tracy now.
Me too.
Although I don't know Tracy's husband.
True. Me either.
She meets him and then they're married. That's
Basically.
that's what happens in the book. And then they move.
But yeah. No, I wasn't surprised, I don't think. It was just Tracy talking about church with her friends. And that's just what she does. That's what I've seen her do.
There's definitely a lot of that. It got me thinking of the like, where is she hanging out? That like, because all of the intros are, I met this person at this writing thing, and I was like, where are our podcasting things? Like, granted, that's how we all get on everybody else's podcasts and all that, but like, there's definitely like a part of that I was like, we need to get this figured out for us.
Definitely.
She does mention in chat, just this is when we have their engagement was 6 months. So it pretty much was. They met and they were married almost. Yeah. Oh wait, that's just their engagement. They probably like I don't know how long before they got engaged. Never mind. But their engagement was just 6 months. Nice. We're learning everything.
All right. So I definitely wanted us to talk about our own stories of church. And in the Discord, Greg also asked how many of us are in the same denomination we started in, and have we tried other churches as well, or even other faiths? So, what is your story of church?
Well, the Church of Christ isn't a denomination, so
Yeah, it is the church. No,
oh man, sorry, that sidetracked myself. So I grew up in Church of Christ. That's pretty much the only like significant denomination that I've been a part of, and I think that like while I have like definitely experienced other churches, one of my like most moving was I went to a Messianic Jewish synagogue.
Oh.
Like there's one of those. And it's actually like not far from like where we go to church now. So I went there once actually with some people from church. And so like that was a very interesting experience. And that was like a memory that how Tracy was talking about experiencing other faiths or other parts of the faith made me like kind of was calling back memories of that experience with me. And then like I've attended some Baptist churches, probably some like actual non-doms, not like Church of Christ non-dom. And then Chris, you and I went somewhere when I visited you in Montana. That was more charismatic than I was used to.
we went to the church that I kind of, which I no longer go to, but we went to the church that ultimately I returned to faith in, I guess is a good way of putting it. Had a large youth group program, outreach youth group program, but yep. But it's like it is a very charismatic. It would be considered non-denominational. They're not affiliated with any group, but yeah, it's an experience. Still love them, but man, their political views are hard to live with. Oh, I guess so. For me, I've had a lot of hardships with the church. I know someone. I'm not gonna find it now, but when talking about like their mother being shunned from an Amish church, due to their separation or the father leaving ultimately. I experienced that really young, kind of. The church we were going to when my parents were together, ultimately following the divorce, really shunned my mom. And watching that take her effects, I don't think she's been to church ever since. But Granted, I was super young at the time. I didn't really comprehend what was going on, but I began processing a lot of that as I got older. Um, and so I really didn't care for church. And then ultimately ended up at the church I returned to through essentially a youth group, kind of flying under the radar. But I'm still friends with a lot of the people I went there with. But uh, but yeah, just with that grew up. Like they were very encouraging at first, but I realized I had a lot of um, like as I got older, began developing like exploring my faith a little more deeply. And also just like my own personal trauma, I realized that there was a lot of trauma from that church. A lot of manipulation occurred within the circles, and just a lot of things. Um, and so through that I didn't really have. So then obviously it didn't affect my faith necessarily, those interactions with the church. It just made me pursue my faith differently um on the solar journey, which is why I so identify with Aaron. Is that who I said earlier? Aaron.
Mhm.
Is because a lot of that um happened. And like one reason why I so then I picked up ministry through Young Life in Helena. I worked on kind of restarting that here at one point, because it wasn't really in existence when I first moved back. And as I fell in love with Young Life when I was at college and wanted to do it. So, but through that, I got to experience, like, I was meeting with church leaders from churches throughout all of Montana. The Catholics, the Lutherans, life churches, um, and it was great. So I decided I was gonna, like, not only just because I wanted to direct people to churches that would work for them, where that would work for their path or whatever. So like as I was, and so I wanted to experience and understand how people experience church differently through these different pieces. So that is where I kind of really began exploring. And then, craziness. I I never understood membership, church membership. That's something that's still foreign to me. Um,
I've technically never placed membership at a church,
Neither have I.
or like,
Just
or like I've never like gone through the process of like being a member, because like for me of like going to church with my parents, like we were members because my parents placed membership, and then um in college it was kind of just college, and like even like going to a church like relatively full time. I don't know, for like a better way of like having one church that I went to for several years. And then I was a minister, and so I didn't place membership. Um, and then like coming back to Dallas, like going to church with Deanna, it's like probably would have been where I would have gone anyway. But I kind of just like became like a de facto member because I was married to somebody that had placed membership. Um, but
yeah, it's just something like I was not familiar with. Like, granted,
mhm,
like it's possible like I may have been a member of the church when my parent, like, from when I was a kid, we may have placed membership
mhm.
at that time, because I think the Methodists do. It was a Methodist church at the time. Granted, my mom grew up Catholic, but it was weird. But so it's very possible we placed membership there. I don't know. But then from there, I just never experienced a church that did membership. I guess so. and and so it's still such a weird concept to me, because now I just go where I want, um, kind of things. Uh, but yeah, so then so now I just do what I want. It's like I'm feeling charismatic this week. I know where to go. I want that contemplative prayer life. I know where to go.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I was born and dedicated into a Baptist church, not Southern Baptist, just Baptist. Um, and when I was still very little, we changed churches. I later found out that that was because of my parents disagreeing with some things that were going on, but I was basically a toddler at the time, so was completely unaware of what was going on. And then I basically grew up in an alliance church. I don't know if you guys have alliance as a denomination. It's, I don't know, evangelical. There was like kind of a big emphasis on missions and
It sounds familiar.
just kind of general evangelical. I don't know. I don't think there was anything like super strangely defining about it. But I grew up there, went to like what we call Sunday school, just kids' church. We don't do like Bible studies before church or anything. That was weird when I went to church once in the States and my aunt was like, "We're going to Sunday school." And I was like, "We're adults. Adults don't go to Sunday school."
Sunday school is the best, even as an adult.
I've never heard of a church in Canada that does adult Sunday school. That's
Like-
just what kids' church is called.
Like, yeah, I have been to churches like you actually like they do school before, so like, but like everyone that like is like, you couldn't just show up for the service because you're late. You had to show up for school and then transition to service.
Yeah, no, we've never
Like-
had that.
This is weird, and this is a long day.
Yeah. I'll say for me, like one of the things is like the reason I say like I love Sunday school is I've typically through my life gotten more out of Sunday school than I have from like big church, using like the youth ministry terms. And so like that's one of the like, so I say that because to be like it's weird to me that that's not a part of what you're used to, because like that is one of those things that's such a big defining point of my spiritual growth is that pre-church church.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I don't get a lot from preachers anymore. Usually. And like because of that, I like, I have a hard time sitting through services, which is like a. So typically, like my deciding factors when choosing a church or going to a church is usually praise and worship, mostly, and then community orientation, like post or pre. Like, are they doing anything where I'm just actually going to interact with other congregants? And those are important things to me. Those are the important aspects to me. One thing I will note: Cameron and I also did go to a church in Oklahoma together. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're confusing, because we went to a few different churches. I know we did go to my church, which is a little more charismatic, but I think the church you're actually thinking of is the church we went to in Oklahoma that my church referred me to.
Nope.
Okay.
It was the one in Montana that I was thinking
Okay,
of.
because we went to a really charismatic church once there, but it was really iffy, and we took off mid-service because it was weird. But we went to a like, it was off Martin Luther King Boulevard, and it was like 6 hours of service.
Yeah. So it was a predominantly African American church where I was the white person.
Felt good.
And so that was, as someone that like had grown up in a predominantly white church, it was very interesting for me to see that from the other side. And I do think that really informed a lot of my faith. And we went there for probably about a month or two, I think.
Yeah, we went for a good portion of that semester, actually.
Yeah. And there was one where like, it was like the Sunday before Easter, they went like 6 hours. Like the preacher preached for super long. And then like we told our friends about it, and like, guys, Easter is gonna be crazy. You gotta come. Like, 'cause he was a great preacher. Like it was one of those. Like it was a good 6 hours. But we were like, Easter is gonna be crazy. You gotta come with us. And he preached like 30 minutes on Easter.
Because there was food. Because there was food waiting. And
I was so confused.
Oh. Well, that was like such a good experience for me too. Like it was, because, it was just they it was just one of those services there. It's like we're just going with the flow, and and you didn't really notice that it was as long as it was until you got done. And you're like, guys, we've been here 3. We still got homework. It's not good for planning your Sundays. That's all I'm saying. But wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Shane, we kind of just like
I'm
jumped
sorry.
in and hijacked part of your faith journey, and we got
Tell us
it's
more.
good.
Tell us more.
Okay, so yeah, I grew up there, going to kids' church and youth group and all that. Did several missions trips with them, so got to experience church in Costa Rica, which was pretty cool. And I don't know, I loved going to church. Like, that's where all my best friends were, and basically all of my friends. But I don't know, it was just, I always liked it. But there, we had gone through my whole time there, we went through several pastors, senior pastors, worship pastors, children's pastors. So there's a lot of saying goodbye and searching for new pastors, which changes things,
Those exploratory
whether it's good or
committees.
not.
Yeah.
Yep. And then when I was 18, 19, there was a lot of politics going on, and my family ended up leaving that church. And they quickly found one in like a nearby city, that I attended quite a bit as well. It was an Evangelical Missionary Church of Canada, which, again, basically what it sounds like. But during that time, I went on a DTS with YWAM and had a lot of interesting church experiences there on base, and also in the countries that we were visiting as well. A lot of Southeast Asia churches. So it's been really interesting to be able to worship internationally with people, and like see how even language isn't that important when you're all just worshiping God together. So my family settled at that church, and I came back and decided to church shop. I basically made a list of all the denominations that were in like my city and the closest town to us, and was like, all right, let's hit them up. I went to another Alliance church in the town near us just to see what a different Alliance church would be like. I went to a Pentecostal church, which was not good. There was some strange things going on the day I went, and I
okay.
did not go back. Not like, oh, like, what are they doing? That's weird. But like, the pastor was saying some theologically questionable things, and I was like, no.
Been there. We have, yep, definitely.
Went to another, later found out it was like a Joel Osteen church, and definitely did not go back there either. Went to a Catholic church, which was very different. Before that, I think I had been to one liturgical service as a teenager for Christmas Eve or something like that. So had very little experience with liturgy, and didn't love it when I was a teenager. It was not something I was used to and just seemed weird. But the Catholic service that I attended, I think that's the only sermon that I have ever actually distinctly remembered what it was about. It was about tithing, and it wasn't your usual, like, you should be giving money to the church. Here, we're going to pass around the plate now. It was, I didn't feel like it was a sales pitch like all of the other tithing sermons that I had heard. It was talking about how much of a blessing it is to be able to give back to God what is already his. And so that was really cool to have a great experience at a Catholic church. Especially since growing up, the Catholic Church seemed weird, and I don't think it was ever explicitly stated, but they were wrong. So my church journey has been much like Tracy's, where when you grow up in one denomination, everyone else seems wrong, and then you go and experience it and you're like, oh, this isn't nearly as weird or as awful as I thought it was going to be. It's actually quite good.
Although I messed up the first time I went to a Catholic church.
I mean, I probably did too.
I went up for communion.
Oh.
So I had one. We had one of the kids in the youth group. Their family was Catholic, like their extended family, and their grandfather passed away and was like buried at a Catholic church, or like I had like a Catholic service leading up to the burial, and like so I went for that, and then got back to the church, and our secretary was like, "You didn't go up for communion, right?" I was like, "No, I knew not to do that." I was at least aware of that.
I will always go for communion wherever I am, even if it's Catholics and they don't agree. That's my rule.
Well, all the churches that I've been to that don't allow you to come for communion still allow you to come up for a blessing. So
I didn't know, and it's just like I'm assuming. I don't know. They made some assumptions about me, obviously, because I never got called out on it or anything. I didn't, until like afterwards. People I was there was like, so you are Catholic? I'm like, wait, what? No. But you want? I was like, and then they informed me. I was like, that's weird, and I'm not gonna abide by it. No, just.
So yeah, after I was church shopping for quite a while, I started going to church with my best friend, who attended. It was technically non-denominational, but definitely on the charismatic end of things. And that is how I met Travis. And so we attended there
And the rest is history.
Quite a while, and then started to feel theologically uncomfortable there as well. So we left to go to church with my parents, and were there for quite a while, but never felt settled there as a home church. The congregation was elderly or young families. And so we eventually, right at the beginning of 2020, started to go to a Lutheran church with some of our D&D group.
Right, you mentioned that
Yeah.
previously. I mean, but obviously it's part of your journey as well. So.
And then COVID hit. So we're still kind of in the process of our church journey.
So, question about when you were church shopping, like seriously. Did you ever like plan out times like so you can go to like 3 church services in a day, check out 3 different churches?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think most of our services are overlapping. There wasn't like a lot of them happen at the same time.
Like when I was doing like the Helena thing, I would find a Saturday night service, a church with a Saturday evening, and go to there, and then try to find one like an early morning one, and like one with a midday, and then sometimes there's even a Sunday evening, and then I go do that. So it'd be like 4 churches in a weekend, just to get the full feel.
That's impressive.
Because there's so many. I was like, I'm not gonna spend a whole year doing this. I'm getting this done this month.
Got things to do.
Oh, and then I guess I'd like to talk about sacraments as part of a church journey as well. Growing up in the Alliance Church, we believed in believers' baptism. And so I was baptized at age 7. The pastor cleared me, said I was good enough Christian to be baptized. I understood what it was about. So I was baptized. And for communion, it was kind of the same thing. As long as you were a Christian, you were allowed to take communion. And so attending like Catholic and Lutheran churches where you have to be like confirmed into that church or whatever the proper term for that is was strange. And I didn't actually realize how much I loved communion until I was not able
Denied
to
it.
take it.
Yeah. Yep. So ours is pretty similar. And
That's why I
Church of
refuse to be
Christ.
denied.
I will not be denied. And so I want to say 13. It was either the summer before I turned 13 or it was the summer after I turned to 13. I feel like I should remember that, but I don't. So here we are. And then ours was kind of similar where anyone who was a Christian could take communion. And there are people that would define was a Christian as baptized in the Church of Christ, but there was kind of also the like don't ask kind of policy of like what are you gonna do, like that kind of thing. And so yeah, so like we were definitely kind of similar in that regard, or are similar, I guess.
Yeah, don't be denied ever. Just
Yeah, Nerd of Nazareth says there are open and closed communions even in many Baptist and non-denominational churches. I was denied once because I was a visitor.
it's just such a weird form of gatekeeping.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
within
I think
denominations
that's all.
sometimes, and like, I think that's really kind of what they use it as. And I'm like, I believe. Thank you. No. But still, like one of my favorite things is actually like close, like small group communion. So, like with just friends, or like it's something I always did with my young life leaders. When we were together, is like I always wanted to share that with them. And yeah, and so like obviously when we all get together, we're doing it, and it's gonna be good bread, probably mediocre wine.
Yeah. So Shanine, earlier you mentioned worshiping in other countries. I did a mission trip with a church I interned at to Bulgaria, and we worshiped with them. And it was my first time having wine, was doing communion. And I was like, there's a good chance this is going to be wine, right? Then I had it and it was 100% not what I thought wine tasted like. And it was not a good reaction on my part. I was like, oh, this is not the taste I was expecting.
But communion is definitely my favorite sacrament in terms of baptism. Mostly like initially, like early on, like my understanding of my church's a take on baptism was essentially just the baptism of the Spirit. That's all you need. You're good. Like when you accept Christ, you are baptized in the Spirit, and like no physical baptism needs to take place. But you could do that if you wanted. Like it was just an optional thing that you can do and go through the kind of the more ceremonious thing. Essentially, like, and then like as I grew in my faith, I decided that ultimately it's like yeah, but it's just such a cool thing, in my opinion. Like it's such a I don't even know like whether or not it is important or not or whatever. Like this is scripture. People were baptized, okay, and is such a cool profession of faith. That's it. That it's like I don't know why you wouldn't want to do this. Granted, I didn't want to do it in front of the church, so me and some close friends went to the lake and we baptized each other. And that's good enough for me.
Yeah. So we talk a lot in CFC about the idea of like an outward confession of inward belief is kind of the phraseology that we use a lot. And kind of getting to that thing, Chris, that you talk about, the idea of like spirit baptism versus physical. Like, so, and I think for us, we kind of like, we do a lot of the like, well, spirit baptism. Now it's time to actually like physically baptize. Like, because I think that that's something that like we do a lot differently than some other faiths where it's the like, I've decided to be baptized and I'll be baptized next month when we baptize people.
You're right.
So like,
Yeah.
so like we do the like, hey, you ready now? Water's warm. Let's go. Like, and you just actually hope the water's warm.
Oh, it was not.
But like,
it was never.
It's not.
the plot twist, it wasn't warm.
I was also baptized early spring. Like we
Yeah.
went out to lake early spring. There was ice on the lake. Just throwing that out there. But still, like, yeah, it's so like, yeah, in college, like we always had those discussions, and I'm just like, we're gonna sit here and debate this all the time. We're all gonna use the same scriptures to reinforce our thing. It's like we're not coming to a consensus on this. Like, you're gonna have to make the decision yourself ultimately. But also, yeah, that's where I was. I do like how Traci does talk about it in the book, like with her daughter, like being a part of a church that baptizes infants, and then also dealing with the question of whether or not, as she's getting older now, like she's old enough, she's 7, like when I made the choice, or did the believer's baptism essentially, and whether or not she still needs to, and how that works with communion. And I really liked seeing that like conflict and that pursuit.
Yeah. I like that too. I thought that was one of those good examples of like the mystery kind of thing. Of it's like it was cool. And now, granted, it's not like a long portion of the book, but it was cool to see Traci kind of wrestling with what that is, like what that means to her, and what it means to her daughter. I thought that was a very cool dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what has most impacted your church journey?
I mean, probably a combination of like a youth group and then college for me. Of like, I didn't go like crazy into like my history, but like I grew up at a pretty large church. So like our youth group was about 200 kids. And so like, I mean, and like for context, the church I worked at was like almost 300. And so like, it was very strange going from like, this is my youth group to this is the whole congregation. But we definitely had some like scandal with ministers. Nothing that I recall being as serious as other churches had to deal with, but we had a little bit of that. But overall, I was very blessed to have 2 really good youth ministers while I was there, because we had like a junior high youth minister and a high school youth minister, and so like that was definitely like a big impact on me. And then I think going to college, and I actually talked about this a little bit on when I guested on the Christian Nerd, but I think going to college and kind of getting to see that there's a lot more, I guess, gray area for a lot of things in the Bible than I had been taught. And that was a very like eye-opening experience that I think very much influenced a lot of my belief going forward. Like I had a really good class as part of the honors program that was basically their premise was, we don't want you to be able to answer any questions, but we want you to know what all the questions are. And then we're going to let you choose how to answer them. Like, and I thought that was very cool. And so like we did a whole unit on by unit, I mean, it was probably a month, 2 months, where all we did was study the creation stories in Genesis. And then we just talked about the various ways that people have and do interpret those. And that was something that like I found very like even like looking back on, that's like one of the classes that I very much like connected with, that I wish I would have paid more attention in. Sorry, mom. um but yeah, so I think a combination of those two, and I mean, even then setting me up to then be a minister, where like that was kind of one of the weird things where it was like, to a degree my spiritual growth is my job. And so like, so I read a lot when I was like, Shanine asked earlier, like we read other Christian books. I had like multiple shelves of Christian books,
It's like just
of
not
church.
recently.
Yeah, just not recently. Because that was one of the challenges that I always had for myself, is I always tried to be reading something. um and so like that, like kind of those three all working in tandem, like had a huge impact on my church and on my church journey.
Well, it doesn't say for better or for worse, so just
No, up for interpretation.
up for interpretation. So there's a lot of things that happened at my former church, which uh that affected me personally, but at the same time, like I stuck it out for as long as I did, for as long as I did, just because like there was a part of me that had to, because they were the start of my faith journey, and there's just some really big things that happened in that faith journey while I was there, that I felt like that obviously they are doing something right. And then some things just started like coming out about my interactions there, and like a lot of things like that happened like behind my back about me, apparently, that I just couldn't stand for. There's a lot of, and then I started picking up as I grew, um grew up a little more. um I started picking up on a lot of just like microaggressions toward me that were just founded, like, and apparently, I mean, from what I understand, I don't know, I still don't understand the whole story, and it involves me, but there that it's rooted, like founded, like a lot of their misgivings with me founded like on falsehoods, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on, so I did choose to leave. But um I'm also like, I'm bringing that up because it, like, obviously that negatively impacted me, but as I previously mentioned, it didn't hurt my faith. Um, because I was full, like, at that point I was really separating, Christians, church, from the God of the Bible. Like, I'm not saying those things, they're not somehow connected, but that is not the image of who he is, of who God is. And that's what I was working on separating. But it did drive me, and it did kind of drive me into uh, pursuing Young Life at the time, which then just drove me into experiencing um, in experiencing all those different churches, and that was very impactful. It drove me, as a result, like I did, like it. Traci kind of mentions it. It's either Traci or someone else's story, but kind of that drive into the exploration, and even like the deeper church history of like where these things come from, was such a cool experience for me, and kind of reapproaching, because uh, experiencing that the kind of the extreme structure, religiosity, but discipline of like Catholic faith. Um, Also, kind of growing up, like I've gone on big stints into Buddhism, and like taking spiritual aspects from, like, or like spiritual methodologies, so like meditation and things from them, kind of understanding, and it forced me to always seek to understand where people are coming from, and how they arrived, even if it's not Christianity, how they arrived at their faith, so that you can have those dialogues. And it's always been awesome. But yeah, most of my impactful things, like with in terms of my faith, have happened in cabs more than more than the church, I guess, at this point.
Right. Um, yeah, I think for me, kind of that situation that caused us to leave the church that I grew up in has probably impacted my church story the most, because that's what caused me to want to wander, I guess. And I wouldn't have had all those experiences in different denominations if it hadn't happened. I would still be there in that church if it hadn't happened. Um, so, there's a lot of frustration and hurt there. So I'm not necessarily thankful that that happened, but I'm thankful for what came out of it. And I think another big impact has just been some mentors in my life that I've seen seeking and wandering in denominations as well.
Yep. I think having leaders as a whole that are willing to like answer questions, maybe that's the best way to say it. But like that's one of the things that Traci mentions a few times. But I think in just having people that are okay with you going on a journey and still being there and supporting you is such an important part of good spiritual growth.
Yeah. So, is there a church experience that has greatly affected your faith?
We did and I feel like I had to give like the stereotypical youth group answer of camp. But but we also once we got into high school, we did a trip where we would go to Colorado and we would hike up one of the 14ers. Um and like that was a trip that I did like the last 3 years of like of high school. So like my sophomore, junior, and senior years. And like that experience as a whole was very like spiritually challenging in a good way. um Even like little things of like one of the things that we did um at our day when we were like acclimating at high camp is that we had like a 3 hour like silent devotion kind of thing, where everyone you just kind of spread out across the mountain for 3 hours, and it was the like obviously if there's an emergency get help, but like don't talk to people, like that kind of thing, and like do whatever you want in this time of like some people would fish, some people would sit and read, some people would journal, like some people would write music, that kind of stuff. But it was such like going okay, thank you Amazon. um and there was a lot of the like 3 hours is so long, and then you would get going and you're like, oh, it's already been 3 hours. And like that experience and being in God's creation and all of those things, like the devotionals that we had there, like all of that was definitely one of those things that has had a profound impact on me.
So I get for me, um, and the farther I get removed, the weirder it becomes to say. Like, it's something I used to always include, but um, so my senior year of high school was rough. Started off rough. It was not a good year, but that fall, at least I can't say that whether or not it was actual healing or if it was just a mistake on my health providers, but I was ultimately diagnosed with a brain tumor um, that fall and received prayer and kind of went through kind of a really long weekend of concern and stayed in prayer, but also had my church, as Cameron has experienced, as a charismatic church. They believe in healing and that divine intervention. But they did lay hands on me, and I had a second MRI to confirm before a surgical consult, and there was nothing. They were clean. Um, but so that is a church experience that, that is one of the great positives that came from my interaction there. It reinforced the kind of the mystic side of things, and that's the path I walked down for the longest time, is just solely trying to seek out those kind of spiritual experiences. And then obviously after I left, I went down the more, you know, what did we call them earlier? I guess sacramental side of things, exploring like the words right there. I almost had it. Almost had it this time. Um, but experiencing that structure and just the disciplinary at the discipline side of just prayer and active, uh, and but that is one that I always, it's still a part of my faith journey, and it you know, but
I
yeah,
did not know that. I've known you for like 12 years or something.
yeah,
Did
it's
not
hard
know.
to talk about at a Church of
Yeah.
Christ school.
I mean, I definitely get that.
Yeah, it's definitely a little. I definitely repressed myself a little bit at that school, just because I'm like, they're gonna think I'm crazy here. But yeah, and that's one reason why I kept going back, like when I did come home and stuff. But eventually, I had to recognize that it wasn't healthy for me as a person. Um, but a lot of those beliefs and like concepts are instilled from there, and yeah, I just kind of now I just definitely believe in healing, but that was just one of the kind of crazier instances of that influence, that belief. And I do have to address this in chat. So Deanna does mention, yeah, COC doesn't approach talking about those things. They don't, and in at least so from the class we took at, they actively, at least so was it personal evangelism? Is that
Oh, yes. That was indeed a class.
there was a piece in there that set like asked me to tell them uh why I don't believe miracles, like why we no longer live in an age of miracles, like from a biblical perspective. I'm like, I've failed that class so hard because there's always questions like, why do you believe this? And it's like, don't tell me what I believe.
Can confirm.
Every time.
I am more liberal than most Church of Christ, and I struggled in that class. And yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing, Chris. um, I think for me, much like Cameron, youth group really gets you when you're young. But I had a really good relationship with our youth pastor, and he would lead um, worship nights with us, which none of my previous youth pastors had done. So that was really awesome. And he challenged us a lot in our personal faith. And I think that was kind of one of the catalysts for me taking more responsibility, I guess, for my faith journey, and just going beyond like daily devotions and learning how to really like be in the Bible and listening to God and stuff like that. So he really impacted my faith a lot. And I think not necessarily a specific moment, but just worship in general seems to get me a lot. Whenever I've been going through a hard time in life, God knows exactly what song to make them sing in church that week, and I just end up crying. And so we've had a lot of moments, me and God, in church. Yeah.
Yep.
All the tears.
Mm-hmm. Been there.
Yep. Okay, so what is a favorite church tradition for you?
So I feel like I'm going to go polar opposite from where we were with this last question, with some very serious answers. And so I'm going to the other end, and that's potlucks. The best
Pot
Christian
blessings, Cameron.
and so earlier when we had been discussing communion, Deanna had posted in chat, I feel like potlucks with wine should count as communion. You can actually commune with people. And 100% like I've always loved potluck stuff and getting to spend time with people um, in a much more literal way than passing the cracker during communion. Getting to break bread with people, getting to like to do more of that, um, and so I've really like, to me, potlucks are one of those, like, definitely not in the Bible traditions or not directly in the Bible traditions, whatever, but like it's definitely one of those things that like has helped me feel welcome and hopefully helped other people in the same way. Deanna also calls out chili cook-offs. It was rigged.
Every time.
Still bitter.
It's not even chili. No, I would definitely agree with that. Like, definitely any opportunity really where it's just the body. Like, there's no programming, no anything. It's just the body together and being together, serving each other, and so those types of things. And but like community in those instances specifically, communion in those situations are my favorite traditions. Or very long worship sessions. For the longest time, like the most church I was doing was the church, which was the reason why I'm mentioning this one specifically, is they would do a 24-hour straight worship session, but it was hosted at a different church every month, and it was a worship band from like all the participating churches, and it was like different backgrounds and different, and so it was just 24 hours of different worship experiences, and it was wonderful. And you actually got to like the entire Helena, like all like you got to interact with people from churches from all around Helena, and that is also a wonderful experience.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I think my favorite, since starting to attend the Lutheran church anyway, has been confession and absolution. Um, I don't know. There's just something about praying together as a church for everything that you've done and left undone, and the ways that you have not loved God with your whole heart, and realizing that, oh yeah, I am a sinner. And then hearing right after that you're forgiven and loved and covered in God's grace and righteousness. And it's powerful every single time. And it's something that I really missed when everything shut down during the pandemic. And that church is very small and very not techy. So our pastor would send out the sermon over a YouTube video, but not the rest of the service with all of the liturgy bits. And I was like, well, the sermon is great, but it's not really what I'm going to church for.
It's like, I'm not here for
So
for your preaching.
I really missed confession and absolution. And yeah, I got to stream from a different church and hear it, and it was like such a relief.
It's like, this is what I'm here for this. I'm here for this.
It's good stuff.
Just have a little recording on your phone just of that the pieces you need.
You should. All right, so there's a few questions that Traci asks throughout the book. She says, does God give some people an extra dose of love for the church? And if so, what are we supposed to do with that? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think definitely. Like I can definitely think of people, and maybe there are people that have had some struggle in their life, and here they are at the other end of it, and are wanting to serve the church. Like I know there was a person at the church in Connecticut named Bob, and he was just that servant heart, and like I think that there's just that, like, some people just have that love for making sure like the church is functioning and safe and the gutters are cleaned. And there are some people that I think just have that love overflows even when they're doing things that um, a lot of people wouldn't want to do. And I think that those are some of the most beautiful examples of people who love the church. Um, and I think at some point all you can do is get out of their way or try to help them when they can, or when you can, like that kind of thing. Sometimes that's all you can do is hop in and be like, well, I'll hold this for you while you do like all this other stuff. So.
Like, yeah, he's gotta, like, that's the only way this makes sense. uh, but like, I don't know where my brain's going right now. Let me assess this. Like, I think, and so often I think it's those people it's it's all church. I definitely know people like this, and it's not love of their church, but of the church too, specifically. And I want to call that out just because it was those people that organize those community wide 24/7 worship events. It's the ones that are trying to bring in more community amongst the different church bodies itself. Um, and yeah, like Cameron said, just let them do their thing. Say yes to them. That's all you do. Just let's do it. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a better answer than that either. I think, yeah, the people who really, really love the church have been given a really special gift and a really special responsibility.
And they're the ones that can possibly get me to go back to church. Like, more formally, I guess I should say. Not that I don't go to church. It's just, it looks a lot different for me anymore than it used to. But yeah, they're the ones that, you know, they asked me to go somewhere, I'd follow them.
All right. Tracy also asks, Church, what if we really saw one another as individuals looking for more of Jesus? So what do you think that would look like?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I struggle a lot with. I talked a lot earlier on about like I definitely struggle with the with the cynicism side of wandering. And this is another one of those things that kind of challenged me of like and has challenged me where it's like even seeing people with like um I'm trying to be as anonymous here as possible. Dealing with people that make very different decisions on how things should go. Um, and I think it's always that challenge of remembering that, like, while like I disagreed, that they are doing what they think will help people come to know Jesus better. And like that doesn't excuse the like just do whatever you want, but like there is that side of like people are living faith in different ways.
Yeah. And I think I definitely approach this from a similar angle as Cameron is like that. Sometimes I get so caught up in my skepticism or my cynicism from my experiences um, that I forget to even just view them as people. um, but just realizing that obviously, you know, uh, but even then I have to even like with the people I've interacted in the past, like I always have to keep in mind that's like I had good experience with them, and I have come to forgive a lot of what's happened and stuff, and like perceiving them as yes, they obviously do have a love of God and that they just want more of them, and that they are pursuing them in that own way. Um, Definitely help. I think like if everyone did that, then yes, there'd be a whole lot less judgment. Um, Sometimes it's just so hard. Um, uh, but I think there'd also be a lot more openness if this was the case, so that differing views on things just wouldn't matter as much. Um, because ultimately, if we perceived each other this way, I think we would just in general experience Jesus a whole lot more in our life.
Yeah. Um like I think like you were saying earlier, Chris, like you can't criticize people's experiences, and there's so much to learn from people who have had different faith journeys, different church stories. Like there's there's a whole wealth of the church that we would open ourselves up to if we would just open ourselves up to it.
Yeah, and like yeah, the reason why I said that earlier is because I think all experiences are valid. It's just, you know, you can't take that away from someone. It's something so unique to you. And I think that's also something that we also have to remember for ourselves that your experiences are valid. And yeah, they're not always something you're going to have to share. Sometimes those experiences are just for you. Sometimes those encounters um, are for you, and it's like some people just aren't going to understand. It's one reason why I don't share my healing journey as often is because honestly, I believe that was done for me.
All right. How can we care for those who have had difficult or painful church experiences?
mean, I think to go off of what was kind of just said is I think a big part is just listening and understanding that even if it's not the way that you feel in the situation, it is a valid way for them to feel. I feel like a lot of times, especially in the church, we very much deal with the like, no, but you should want to be here. It's like, well, like just because somebody feels that way doesn't mean everyone did. Um, and like I think there is that degree of sitting and listening and seeing if you can help them come back. And then at other points, there's kind of like one of the places I struggled as a minister, um, is like when there were people that had criticisms of the church that I, especially the ones that I felt were extremely valid criticisms and bothered me, and like maybe not to the same extent, but like, and I feel like there's that challenge too of like what's the like how do you be there for people that don't want to be there? I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but and so I think that that's definitely can be a challenge with people that have those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, definitely just let them know that their experiences are valid. I mentioned that I most related to Aaron, and it's because he still approaches his pain, his hurt with that, and like his ultimately, but he hasn't, you know, allow them to find community and validation maybe in their relationship with you. That can be enough church for them.
Mm-hmm.
That is church itself too. Like that is it's a different form. Understanding that church is going to come in different forms, especially when people have been hurt in the structure we consider it to be. um and I guess encouraging them that yeah, they don't have to go to church to continue their faith journey, I think is the most important thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
eventually God will bring them where they need to be.
And I think kind of just to echo that, I think being church with them without having the ulterior motive of trying to get
Yes.
them to come back to church. Like I know that's something that I've seen a lot with people is the like, we did this Bible study, but they just won't come to church with me. It's like, well, maybe like the Bible study is where you need to be right now, like, or where they need to be right now. Actually, that's kind of a
It's
better
like
way of saying that.
that can be enough.
Yeah.
One thing to also do, like in like in a lot of the experiences in the book, make sure they know they are wanted and missed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it doesn't have to be like from the whole church, but like at least with them, like at least in their interactions with you, even like just you know that friendship is important, and in that friendship exists belief and faith. Hopefully, I mean, um, but yeah, I think those are important pieces. Like kind of going back to the book, even like with Tracy's experience with the mandatory vacation of one of the pastors. Um, there's a part of me that wants to say that wasn't entirely right. Like, yes, I believe that mandatory vacation, but like telling them to also cut themselves off entirely from the church,
Mm-hmm.
but also like acknowledging that when people are in that almost burned out state, it's like they still need you in their life. They just have nothing to like. You have to assess what you can do for them at that point
Mm-hmm.
too. And so like that's something, ask them what they need. Those people who have been hurt or are burnt out from the church. Um, and then just have that general faith discussions like, well, is this actually affecting your faith? And then what can we do about that kind of situation? Like, it's like therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think you guys hit on all the important things, listening and no ulterior motives.
That's a hard
And
one.
yeah, I think just really caring for that person as a person and yeah, just being there for them in what they need. And being willing to build community with them outside of church.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One final rapid fire question for fun. Traci mentioned her favorite hymns are Victory in Jesus, Sweet Hour of Prayer, and When We Walk with the Lord. Do you have a favorite hymn or worship song?
I'm just like going through my like Spotify
Yeah.
and just like looking at things. I tend to fall into that. I like a lot more contemporary stuff, and that's kind of one of the reasons in the Church of Christ I've always struggled. Of like, I always see like all the Christian memes of like, I can't believe we sang Oceans 4 times in worship today, and I'm just here of like, I would have loved Oceans once this month. And so so kind of like just looking through like Build Your Kingdom Here by Rend Collective. I love Rend Collective. And like that's one kind of just like jumping through. And then there's I think it's Us for Them by Gunger. I really enjoy that one as well.
I'm just drawing blanks. I guess like traditional hymns. Is it I Need Thee Every Hour?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll go with that one for now. I'm trying to sing the songs in my head now too. It's like, is this what I like, or is this one I fall asleep to?
So for hymns, I really like it as well. And then also,
as well as a great one.
if you have not yet discovered it, the Spotify playlist Hymns for Hipsters is actually fantastic. It's like hymns but in a contemporary style. So
That kind of reminds me of one of my favorite, like looking at my Spotify, is Christmas pop. And this sounds kind of like up that exact same alley. So I have
Totally.
saved this to my library.
Yes, it's so good. I particularly love Grace Alone by the Modern Post in that playlist and In Tenderness by Citizens. So, yeah.
In chat, Deanna shouts out "In Christ Alone" and "Be Thou My Vision."
Yeah.
And she says, "I love anything with this Celtic sounding melody."
All right.
Devil May Cry says, "Sonic Flood's Cry Holy" is a good one.
Oh, Sonic Flood. That is a name I have not heard in a while.
Right? I'm like, ooh, throwback.
Throwbacks.
All right. Any final thoughts on Not All Who Wander Spiritually Are Lost?
Everyone should read it.
Yeah, great book. Highly recommend. It's, I feel like, now tying this back into our other book clubs, I feel like one of the major criticisms we've had of a lot of books is that they've been about a third too long. And by us, I mean me. That's been one of my major criticisms of a lot of books. It's like, but I felt like this was a perfect length. And I feel like it's a good read. Definitely recommend. Can't wait to talk to Traci on Monday.
Yeah, I really can't wait to talk to her. I'm looking really forward to it, and just because, just from this, like, she's obviously had such a lot of experience, I should say, that I find fascinating. And yeah, I especially think that if you've only really experienced one form of church, you should read this. Not saying that you need to go out and experience, but just understand that the church is a lot bigger than you think also, and that these different expressions of faith are valid.
Yeah. Can't recommend it enough. It made me want to talk about church. It made me want to go to church. It made me love church a little bit more.
And then after you read this, go read Lord of the Rings.
Sure.
I'm just saying. There's a quote from it. I mean, the title is... the quote is Tolkien, okay?
Fair. You're right.
Oh, yeah, I will say my one criticism is, once again, not enough Tolkien.
There wasn't a giant squid, so it wasn't realistic.
The real questions we'll be asking Traci.
Yes. Why wasn't there a giant squid?
How have you not encountered a giant squid in your life in preparation for this book? But she's listening right now, so she's getting the questions right now. So
She can be prepared, for
exactly
for Monday.
Okay, so
if she is listening, Traci, I am going to be asking why this title. Just throwing that out there.
all right, so our next book club, which will be on July 29th, we are going to be doing Doctor Who, The Ruby's Curse, a River Song novel by Alex Kingston. River Song herself. We're pumped. And
there's a lot of things in that title I'm trying to assess here.
yeah,
I'm like super hyped. I did not realize that this was written by the person who played River Song.
yes,
I'm even more excited.
yes,
That's great.
and we'll drag Chris along with us.
Drag him right into the blue police box.
I'm here for this. Kind of. It's either going to turn me completely on for Doctor Who, but we'll see. Or I'm just going to be like, good book. Still not watching it.
We'll see. I have hopes.
I recently tried watching... What's her name's again? Oh, close us out. We can talk about this after.
Okay, and as we have mentioned before, Traci will be joining us on Monday, so make sure you tune in here at 6:45. And also you can check out her blog at tracesoffaith.com and chat with her on Twitter at tracesoffaith. Highly recommend. And huge shout out to Traci for hanging out in chat, braving Twitch, and coming to talk with us.
Actually, shout out to everyone in chat, because you guys have been having an awesome conversation, and I've been loving watching it go through. It's wonderful.
All right. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as OneGeek411. Chat with us on our Discord server. Check out cool stuff at our Redbubble store. Email us at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch us live on Twitch on Monday nights, and find the video on our YouTube. Rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out the show notes at onegeek411.com. I'm Shanine. You can find me on Twitter at The Hoot and Howl, or Instagram at Hoot and Howl Tales, TALES.
I'm Cameron. You can find me at Humar Whittle all over the internet.
And I'm Chris, and you can find me I'm at Not So Foreign with a 4, EIGN, and also everywhere on the webs.
Thanks so much for being here, everyone. Go read a book.
I love you.
Oh, and wash your hands. Going out there for a second.